Duncan.
Duncan.
Right.
Okay. Both were excellent instructors. My gosh, the equipment really is heavy. Even though my experience is, even though it's a video and kind of an online type of presence, the emotional angst that can come up is amazing. And for me in my profession, you know, I dealt with situations like that, not necessarily the weapons piece of it, but you know, the out of control person, the person that might be on drugs or alcohol, you know, the whole thing. So if you haven't done it, you need to do it. It's just well worth it, and it certainly does give us some sense of what our officers have to go through.
Yes.
Just a piece of it, but enough to. Oh, let me take my hat off.
Yes, so please sign up. We will be dedicating our December meeting to a debrief about the laser shot training. So if you're planning on signing up, that's your deadline. And with that, Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you, our new chair, to get us started.
Thank you, Kim. I'm Sean Stolzheimer. They've nominated to be chair for the next work session, and Danny Rada will be the vice chair for the next work session. Let's start off by first welcome everybody. It is 5:01 p.m. So let's go ahead and get this started.
I can go ahead and start roll.
Yes, go ahead and start roll. Thank you, Kim.
Great. So Officer McDonald is not with us this evening. Our Commander McDonald. Officer Nunn.
Yep.
Shelby Rahala.
Yes, here.
Michael O'Brien.
Here.
Emilio Calderon.
Here.
Liz Newton.
Here.
John Trin.
Present.
Jimmy Brown.
Here.
Lee Landers.
Here.
Patty Lofgren.
Here.
Justin Lowe. Nope. Danny Rada.
Here.
Valerie won't be joining us this evening. Sean Stolzheimer.
Here.
Nick Jarmer. Oh, Nick just joined. It's connecting to audio. And Jeff Mott.
Here.
All right, and that is roll, Sean.
All right, thank you, Kim. Now I'd like to invite you to join me in a centering our conversation tonight. First, I will read a statement, then I will ask you to join me in a breathing exercise to help bring focus and thoughtfulness to the conversation of today. Today, we convene to listen and learn from each other through reflection and discussion. As we reevaluate and improve our public safety practices, we elevate the voices and experiences of the communities who have been and continue to be disproportionately impacted by inequitable systems. We thank all of those who have advocated and worked on dismantling injustice in Tigard and our broader community. We build off their efforts to create more equitable and just outcomes for people of all backgrounds and abilities. Now we will do a breathing exercise together. You may turn off your camera for this portion. Close your eyes or gaze softly downward. Feel the chair under your legs. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. Feel your hands in your lap. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. Feel your feet on the ground. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. Slowly open your eyes and begin to breathe normally. Thank you all for participating and creating space with me. Okay, we've done roll call. Let's proceed to public comment. Did we receive any public comment today for tonight?
We did. We received one letter from a Ms. Ryan. It was 3 pages and Eduardo sent it out this evening. In the letter, she did ask for a response. So if there was interest from this group in responding, I think it would be appropriate for 1 or 2 members to volunteer to draft that response on behalf of the PSAP.
Yeah, I can go for it. If anyone wants to help, that'd be awesome. It's a great letter, honestly. She goes into a lot of detail. So happy to draft a response. What's the process though? Who do I send it to before we get back to her?
Usually you would send it to Eduardo and I, and we'll
Okay.
get back with you. And then if you need any support from staff, do let us know.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to jump in. I thought it was a very powerful letter also. So yeah, I'd be happy to help if you want to connect at some point.
Sweet. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Jeff, for taking that on. And then there was no other public comments, and there was nobody asked to speak this evening.
Right. So there are no speakers. Tonight, no community members have joined us to speak. Public comments are vital to the board's mission, and we welcome community feedback on our work. If you have comments for the board's written testimony, must be submitted by 4:30 p.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. If you'd like to speak at our meeting, please email our staff at eduardo.tigard-or.gov. Additional details and instructions are available at www.tigard-or.gov/PSAB. Okay. Next, it's time for Chief Alpine to give the Chief's update.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Really, the only update is an ask of all of you, maybe a little brainstorming for our next session. We see a pattern from the Academy where we may end up onboarding new hires, but not going to the Academy for several months. And what a great time. We have 2, one that is just going to the Academy at the end of November, and the other one we're still waiting, but the soonest we can get them in is March, but maybe as late as May, depending on the slots that are allocated. But I thought this would be a great time to maybe build in the orientation, the onboarding of community expectations. And where either a panel from the board or diverse community members the officer can meet with them and just hear directly from the community on what they expect of their guardians, what they want to see out of the officers when they interact, or things to remember. So it's not just me talking, but maybe community is also weighing in. Might be even opportunities for orientations to St. Anthony's or the Muslim Education Trust or other areas to really get exposure, maybe even Emilio, to the high school. So just want to see, put that in your brain as an opportunity. I've asked him to maybe move that up on the schedule, which is why it's at next meeting, because we only have so much where we'll have the officer available and then they'll go into their program. So I don't want to miss that opportunity by kicking this down the road a little bit. So would just like to see if you guys are interested in maybe discussing or envisioning what that community expectations might be.
Yeah. And like the chief said, I see some nuts. If folks are interested in this as a discussion topic, then we will devote most of our next meeting to talking about kind of how this will look like.
And maybe come with your thinking hats on where, if we did field trips, where that might be, maybe a list of exposures and opportunities to meet maybe key institutions, things of that nature. That would be helpful. The other thing I'd like to bring to the attention to the board is just, again, situational awareness. There was some concern that in September and then again this month, we had 2 deceased bodies along Fano Creek Trail, but yet they're just, if you're familiar, one was in September behind the police department, and the other was basically under the viaduct of 99 just off of Main Street. So quite a bit of a distance away. But both of them were are unhoused individuals that have passed away from natural causes. And it wasn't from the elements as much as you can imagine, unhoused people do not get regular checkups. And both of them had some significant health issues. So there's no safety to the community. The only safety issue is really to our unhoused folks and their vulnerability, and all the more reason why we're trying to ensure there's outreach and getting people some assistance. But again, there's been a little bit of chatter, and want to make sure that all of you know that there's no danger of somebody, doing something criminal to our residents, and that it really is just a product of a very at-risk living style. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. And Patty, I see your hand.
Yes, Chief McAlpin, can you say a little bit more about what you mean when you say these officers are you talking about potentially visiting the Muslim Educational Trust, spending a day there, having them do a presentation of some sort for the officers? What kind of things are you envisioning?
Great question. It can be something as simple as a panel with our community leaders and members of the Public Safety Advisory Board, maybe in a Zoom meeting, and then can give expectations, or also an opportunity in the future, maybe not in COVID if there's still some restrictions, but if there was a visit. The officers do go to these different locations as part of their onboarding in their first, and I think, Officer Nunn can attest to that. They need to know some of these major institutions, but again, this was more before they officially even go to the academy. What else can we do to get them thinking about our community and how our community, expectations are of them. So we kind of plant some seeds in their brain before they even go to the academy.
Thank you. And Chief, believe that's your update. Sean?
Okay, thank you, Chief. Next, we'll continue our conversation about the use of force recommendations. Kim, please take over.
Thank you. Isn't it this back and forth? It works. Yeah, so in the last 2 meetings, we have been going through the 4 use of force recommendations that came through the board. In the last 2 meetings, we've gone through the first 3. We're going to go through the 4th one in the same manner we've gone through the first 3. So we'll go out into breakout rooms to discuss in small groups, come back together to discuss the recommendation, edit it in real time. And then we're going to vote on all 4 of them individually this evening as well. So with that, I'm going to pull up the 4th recommendation, and then I think the chief had some thoughts on how this has been done in other jurisdictions that she can share as well before we go to the breakout rooms.
Yeah, Yeah, my thought was rather than me as a board member, especially with Commander McDonald gone, that I would not be voting. I really just want to hear your thoughts and recommendations and then the vote as it comes through. So even though technically the way this is set up, I do get a vote, I'm electing not to, and I'm not sure Shelby supports that from legality, but I really do believe I need to hear from all of you and not enter a vote. So I don't think I get to abstain.
No, Chief, I meant we'd had a really interesting conversation in our prep meeting around some emergency communications models that other departments employ that were related to this recommendation.
Of
I think
course,
you might, I think you might want to introduce the group to that.
Oh, yeah, you're catching me off guard here,
Oh,
Kim.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Well, anyway.
It's kind of cryptid, and I'm not in sync with you here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I realized I sprung that on you. But this is the recommendation that came through is we recommend the Tigard Police Department, the city of Tigard, develop and implement a model emergency communication strategy. By preparing those strategies in advance, the mayor, city council, police department, and city staff will be prepared in the event of a major use of force event or other emergency. This could involve hiring outside crisis management consultants and coordinating training and plan development activities with neighboring communities. The goal of the recommendation is to prepare the mayor, city council, and the police department to clearly and effectively communicate information to the community and the media in a way that will instill confidence about the administration of justice in Tigard.
Okay, now I'm with you. Okay, yes, so in other cities, what they've developed is, again, they identify community leaders, depending on the size of the city, might be in their sectors or districts, if you will. And when a major incident comes up, you have a designated person that's going to call those community leaders and advise them of what's happening, and really look to them to also help message and make a coordinated message. And so those are people that have been identified as, a lot of times it is just your community leaders, might be from a church or faith-based community, or there's some nonprofits. So it's been very effective. I know in Tacoma we had it. And again, I knew when I was a sector lieutenant and I had a major incident, I could call this roster of personnel and let them know what's happening, and that I would update them as much as information as I had. And so I really found that model to be quite useful.
Thank you, Chief. Sorry I put you on the spot. All right, so we're going to go into the breakout rooms. Feel free to take a screenshot of the recommendation before we go, and I'll give you a minute. I like it, Liz, the camera. All right, we're going to open the rooms. And we'll be in there for 10 minutes and then come back together. Oh, and please nominate a scribe to take notes and report out. All right. Good evening. Welcome back. Looks like one of the rooms is still in discussion, so we'll wait for them to rejoin us. Oh, there. Welcome back, everybody. I know we had an interesting discussion in my room, so looking forward to hearing about everybody else's. Is there a volunteer scribe to start us off? Oh, Jimmy. Jimmy is our volunteer scribe. He's got more energy than anybody else I've met today.
Hi, it's the Coca-Cola. And I'm doing it first because, I want to keep this fresh in my head. So our group had I think, a really good discussion about this. And we simply have come down to the belief that the recommendation as it stands needs clarification. That's it in a nutshell. Now, our discussion around that brought us a number of questions. And perhaps, Chief, you can help us answer these. One is there any type of listing available currently that you utilize or city members utilize around getting this kind or getting information out to the public in some form or fashion? There was some discussion. Nick brought up some discussion around the incident command process, that we know that in policing organizations, criminal justice organizations, parole and probation organizations, fire organizations, that in certain kinds of activities, there's an incident command process that's established, which articulates, who's in charge, who's the PIO, how's information getting out to the networks and to the community at large. It feels like that what we're looking at here is a public communication process versus a content process, and that public communication process focusing on the broader community to inform them. At the same time, we also indicated that when an incident is in occurrence, it would be difficult to proactively connect a communication strategy, because most of those communication strategies would appear to come forward after the fact. As an example, if there is a officer involved shooting going on, we're not going to necessarily broadcast this out to, if you go to Hall and Durham Boulevard, there is a shooting going on. It's really going to happen after the fact. And the information that would go to the media may be somewhat different, the information going to the community at large, because the media may want to know, well, who was involved in the shooting, how many officers, how many shots fired. The community wants to know, am I safe? Is somebody running down my street? And if those things are in action, a communication strategy isn't necessarily as at least as noted in this recommendation, isn't necessarily the best way to go. I think Danny indicated, do we already utilize a code red system, and how would that differ from what this particular recommendation is talking about? And then I think we kind of ended up with, the issue of public threat emergency versus community interest type of discussion in a recommendation, which all led us to, we think this needs some additional clarification. Did I get it, folks? Team?
It was a thorough discussion for 10 minutes. I applaud your team.
Okay.
Who would like to go next? Jeff, yes.
Only half as much energy as Jimmy, just one hand wave. interesting because we didn't talk much about the content and the specific type of emergency like your group did. We talked more about the structure of what a communication line would look like. So I totally agree. Personally, I don't want to speak for the rest of my group, but having different processes for different types of emergencies is probably makes sense, and how to build out that content probably, you know, makes sense to have a discussion about that too. Speaking to just this communication line that we talked about, the chief set us up pretty well with talking about Tacoma. We also had the benefit of having Liz in our group. So we talked a lot about existing infrastructure within the city already, specifically the crisis manager and the team surrounding that, using that existing infrastructure and then bolstering it using other communities as a template, like the Tacoma example. One thing our group stressed as well is having a two-way relationship-based communication and like a community org chart with diverse backgrounds and communities as part of that to get them a message out, and extending that to neighboring communities as well. But of course, having an online presence is important. We did talk about kind of the January incident and how maybe that could have gone better because there's a lot of spin in a lot of different places within the community. And you know, for better or for worse, the online communities are a place where that happens. The one kind of umbrella thing we talked about across all of that is transparency being the most important factor. And that's where maybe an outside consultant could come in to talk about how much detail can the city provide or the police department provide as they're communicating to our community members. And then, of course, wanting to continuously improve by debriefing after communication goes out and seeing how everything pans out. How can we improve the process if unfortunately something happens again or the next time? Did I do all right? Cool.
Thank you, Jeff. And Sean, you are our third script.
Okay. We got a little bit more context in our group discussion too. Generally speaking, we felt like we didn't have the full background of what system is currently in place and what deficiencies there might be. It was pointed out that Tigard has a communications department with a communications director. The Tigard Police has a public affairs officer and a person that handles crisis management. So we would like to see further evaluation of what is currently in place and what deficiencies might exist, and in particularly what were the learning lessons of the Tigard police shooting or the tragedy that happened. What were the learning lessons from that? And then has anything changed since that happened? Have there been any updates to the communication plan? So anyways, that was our consensus, is we needed more information, and yes, it certainly is something that is worthwhile to be discussing.
Thank you, Sean. So what I'm kind of hearing from all three groups is a need for more clarification, more context on what systems currently exist and what those strengths and weaknesses are, how those systems were involved in the January officer-involved shooting. So kind of I'm thinking there might be two options here. One is to create a recommendation around evaluating those current processes. The other is to kind of put off this recommendation at this time and maybe ask for a presentation on what the city's current communications infrastructure is and some of those conversations, and then come back to a recommendation at a later date. But I'm curious if someone sees a different alternative or feels strongly one way or the other. Jimmy.
I think it's a good idea to, and I think this is certainly part of the role of PSAB, is to look at what is in the existing system to see if there are any necessary modifications that need to occur. If we have a existing process and we want to add to that, then certainly that's a discussion that we can have. I think being able to have the department as well as the city evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the existing system is a good place for them to look at and then maybe utilize the PSAB as a sounding board to those activities. If there is an existing system, how has that system worked? How did it work in real time with the most recent incident, whether it be the gentleman that passed away at Fennel Creek or in the Culvert area, or the January shooting? Because those are real-time kinds of testing situations that you plug that information system or that communication system into.
Thank you, Jimmy.
I think I heard all of the thought process, and I'll just go back to, I think the lack of identified community partners is probably the same thing I'm struggling with. For example, again, pardon the fact that I'm going to use Tacoma again, but like I was the LGBTQ liaison. So if there was an incident, whether it was a hate crime, an assault, or, the death of an LGBTQ community, I would go to the Rainbow Center or Oasis, and I would, talk as partners with them on this is what we're doing and how they might help outreach. If it was, whether it's a use of force or shooting or, something that the Black community, I had the Ministerial Alliance, the Black Collective, the NAACP. So there were groups that were known in the community. And of course, a lot of pastors in the various faith base that we would call upon to let them know when a significant event happened. Because they were recognized as leaders in the in the community, and we could answer questions, or they could get a meeting together if there was a concern of safety, or if it had a role of the police department, how we handle things. So it was a way of instead of just putting it out to the universe, you were actually partnered up with different community leaders, and I haven't really found that voice other than, like I said, St. Anthony's or the Muslim Education Trust, which actually has a big reach in Portland and not a lot in our community members, the Latinx community. And so you can see my challenges of trying to identify different community leaders. But the other part is all real good information as well. And I'll take a look at that and compare it to what we have currently.
Jimmy, please.
So, thank you, Chief. We have a fairly small community as it relates to, certainly to people of color in the Tigard area. However, I think this is an opportunity for the partnership activities to come into play. I've been doing a lot of work with Tigard-Tualatin School District over the last year and a half around budget and school funding issues. And they have a very broad-based coalition that they connect with around school-related kinds of activities. And I'm not saying necessarily that school-related issues are the same as community safety issues or policing issues, but I think that they have some processes that they've established, that they've worked to build, that we may want to at least ask them, what organizations are you working with when you pass information out to the local community about school-related issues? I know that there's a Latinx community organization process. I know that there is a Asian Pacific Islander connectedness. I know that there are not necessarily African-American organizations inside of Tigard proper, but there are key individuals that can connect with that community. There is the religious and ecumenical organizations that are doing some things around homelessness and houseless individuals that certainly could be used as a contact. And so maybe we sit down either as the department, or if members of PSAB in their own networks can provide information to the department and to the city as to, here are some potential organizations that you can utilize to get a broad approach to sharing of information.
I agree completely. And about 3 years ago, I did reach out to Zinnia, and we established that relationship because I found the school was my best way in Tigard because there weren't those other groups that I was used to. So you're spot on, Jimmy. I agree, we have that. But I think to the extent of using them as a communicator for an incident, I hadn't thought about it that way. So thank you for the suggestion, but we do have that established relationship. In fact, the PSAB will get to meet Zinnia during, between now and the end of our time, because I've asked that she actually do the update on the SRO and go through the entire process and outreach. So that would be a good time to meet her and see the connections that she has. So thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that.
Sean, please.
30 years ago, if an incident like this happened, we would read about it in the paper the next morning. The local coffee shops delivered to our mailbox. And that is not how communication works anymore. Jimmy is absolutely spot on. There are a number of groups of young Tigard residents in different groups. And there's a lot of people in Tigard that get their news through social media, different types of social media. And that's the place where, if those forums are open, there's opportunity for immediate feedback on what the city's doing right or wrong. When that happened, I was watching the mayor really taking some tough hits from people on social media while he was giving a podcast. So it just shows you the power of social media and how much things have changed over the years, and how you really need to quickly get out in front of things like this and reach all of these groups and let them know what's happening. And even more difficult when it's a tragedy like the one we're talking about that really caused a lot of blowback in the community. I mean, it was an active investigation. Nobody knew what happened, and nobody could fully disclose what happened. It was in a fact finding. So that's a lot to digest and plan for as a community. And I do not think we're alone in this phenomenon. I think it is very widespread right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. So based on this conversation, I've reworked it is definitely a strawman recommendation version that we can look at together. So in this version, the Public Safety Advisory Board recommends that the Tigard Police Department and the City of Tigard evaluate current emergency communication strategies, tools, and systems, Specifically evaluate the communications response to the January officer-involved shooting, as well as the city's ability to effectively communicate in similar emergency incidents. Evaluate on least transparency and ability to partner with and contact community leaders. As a result, the TPD should improve processes in areas that may be found deficient. And then the goal has remained the same, to evaluate how the TPD can clearly and effectively communicate information to the community and media in a way that will instill confidence about the administration of justice in Tigard. Jeff, please.
Yeah, I think I'd just echo Sean's statement about online presence. I know we have Instagram and Facebook for the city, for the police department. Next door, the city operates there too. So I think online presence is also important, because that's where a lot of people get their information. So yeah, thanks, Sean, for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Going by the lack of hands, are we feeling comfortable with this recommendation this evening? I'm seeing one thumb up, some nods. Excellent. All right, so we are going to go ahead and start at the top and work our way down our list of voting. So real quick, just to recap our voting procedures, it's been a while since we've done this. It is a roll call vote. Each person will be called on. When you are called on to vote, you have the opportunity to say yes or no, as well as offer any additional comment or nuance that you would like to go along with your vote, which will be captured as part of the statement. Shelby, am I missing anything? Oh, quorum for this group is at least half of the members present, which we definitely have this evening. But for a measure to pass, we need to achieve consensus, which is defined in the charter as 75% yes votes. Okay, so the first recommendation that we will be voting on this evening has to do with cross-cultural communication training. We recommend that the TPD and Tigard City staff identify providers of or internally develop cross-cultural communication training. The training should cover cross-cultural communication styles, best practices, and community interaction. Be established in collaboration with community leaders, neighboring/peer agencies, or educational specialists. Be held at a regular interval on the recommendation of a qualified provider or specialist. Be mandatory. The goal of this recommendation is to reduce use of force events involving BIPOC individuals in the Tigard community to a level that is statistically comparable to the percentage of such BIPOC individuals who reside or work in Tigard. And we will start with Officer Nunn.
Yes.
Shelby Rahala.
Yes.
Michael O'Brien.
Yes.
Emilio Calderon.
Yes.
Liz Newton.
Yes.
John Trin.
Yes.
Jimmy Brown.
Yes.
Lee Landers. Oh, he left the group. Patty Lofgren.
Yes.
Justin Lowe.
Yes, and I would like to make the comment that with the goal that the recommendation is to reduce use of force events for BIPOC individuals to a level that is statistically comparable to the percentage of BIPOC folks who live and work in Tigard, I would also like to emphasize that in general, an overarching and universal goal is that we are reducing use of force events as a whole. And that we are protecting the citizens who either reside or work within Tigard.
Thank you, Justin. Danny Rauda.
Yes.
And Sean Stoldreyer.
Yes.
By unanimous vote, the first recommendation passes. Moving on to number 2, this was about use of force data. So the recommendation reads, we recommend the Tigard Police Department release anonymized, updated use of force data quarterly instead of the current annual analysis. This release should include contextualized information about the incidents. The goal of this recommendation is to help police and the community monitor progress towards use of force goals in real time with more frequent data release. And starting again with Officer Nunn.
A no on that one.
Shelby Rahala,
Yes.
Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Emilio Calderon,
Yes.
Liz Newton,
Yes, with the caveat that there may be some discussion around the timing of this when it gets to council, just because the council will probably be asking the department about the quarterly versus, I'm just anticipating that, but I'm voting yes, so thanks.
thank you, Liz. John Trin,
Yes.
Jimmy Brown,
Yes.
Patty Lofgren,
This is a question. Can I abstain?
I defer to Shelby.
So no. The only reason to abstain would be if you have a personal interest or other compelling reason. Otherwise, the goal of council was to hear everyone's voice. And so we shouldn't be abstaining from difficult decisions.
Yeah, I guess I'm chewing on the statistical aspect of this. Releasing data more often can skew the data and skew the perception of the data. So that's my my concern. So I guess I'm going to say no at this point.
Thank you, Patty. Justin Lowe,
Yes.
Danny Rowden,
Yes.
and Sean Stoldryer.
No.
And I'm gonna have to do some real quick math. I'm sorry, guys.
Am I been keeping track?
I think we have 12 members.
We have 8 people that said yes.
So we have 11 members. So this measure has not passed, or this recommendation has not passed. We need 75% of the vote. We had 72. And I am going to call on Jeff, who put up his hand.
Thanks. I just think the look of this report maybe would provide clarity one way or the other if people are on the fence, because just because it's potentially released every 3 months doesn't mean it only has to show 3 months of data. It could still show a full year or longer, so you could still have potentially more information. I think to me, this is more just about keeping things updated so you have better visibility to trends if they go the wrong way. You know, it doesn't only need to include 3 months worth of things, which to Patty's point and the public comments point, it would be like almost nothing. So yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. And Patty?
If we were releasing yearly data on a quarterly basis, so the last 12 months, that I would vote for, absolutely.
All right, this one has not passed, and I don't hear any measure to or any movement to amend it at this point. So we're gonna move forward into our third recommendation for the evening. This one is investigating adding 4 additional hours of practical hands-on force on force training. Sean, we're going to move forward into this recommendation unless you have a comment about this one. Otherwise, we can come back to your hand in a second.
We can come back to that.
Okay. So we recommend that the Tigard Police Department investigate adding 4 hours of practical hands-on force-on-force training per year. This could raise the required training hours to 12. Elements for additional research include budgetary impact, including adding a training facility for Tigard officers, training practices of peer agencies, and can the training be done on an as-required basis by the recommendation of a skilled trainer. The goal of this recommendation is to help officers better respond to high-pressure situations in a way that is consistent with Tigard community values. By decreasing the time between training sessions and giving officers more total hours of practice, officers can be better prepared. And we will start again with Officer Nunn.
So I have a question because there needs to be, I think, some clarification. We're talking about requiring 12 hours of force on force training. Adding 4 hours would not increase us to 12 hours of force on force training. That didn't change from when we were talking about defensive tactics. So are we talking defensive tactics altogether or force on force?
I think it's adding 4 hours of force on force to raise the required defensive tactics training hours to 12.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because just adding 4 hours would not get us to 12 hours of force on force.
Right.
Okay, then it's a yeah if we want to add hours to force on force.
Thank you, Officer. And Shelby Rahala?
Yes.
Michael O'Brien?
Yes.
Emilio Calderon?
Yes.
Liz Newton?
Yes.
John Trin?
Yes.
Jimmy Brown? Jimmy?
Oops. Yes.
Patty Lofgren?
Yes.
Justin Lowe?
Yes.
Danny Rauda?
Yes.
And Sean Stoldryer?
Yes.
Okay. And so this one has passed. And then Sean, you had a comment taking us back to the previous recommendation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll withdraw that. Sorry.
And so moving on to the last recommendation, this is the one we discussed earlier this evening around evaluating current emergency communication strategies, tools, and systems. We recommend that the Tigard Police Department and the City of Tigard evaluate current emergency communication strategies, tools, and systems. The evaluation would specifically evaluate the communications response to the January officer-involved shooting, as well as the city's ability to effectively communicate in similar emergency incidents. This should evaluate on at least these areas of transparency, ability to partner with and contact community leaders, and online presence. As a result of the evaluation, the TPD should improve processes in areas that may be found deficient. The goal of this recommendation is to evaluate how the TPD can better clearly and effectively communicate information to the community and the media in a way that will instill confidence about the administration of justice in Tigard. And we'll begin with Officer Nunn.
Yeah.
Shelby Rahala?
Yes.
Michael O'Brien?
Yes.
Emilio Calderon?
Yes.
Liz Newton?
Yes.
John Trin?
Yes.
Jimmy Brown?
Yes.
Patty Lofgren?
Yes.
Justin Lowe?
Yes.
Danny Rauda?
Yes.
And Sean Stoldryer.
Yes.
And so this recommendation is also passed. And congratulations, everybody. This was last month of meetings and 3 recommendations that will be going to the Tigard Police Department. John, please.
I just have clarification. It seems like there was a little confusion on the recommendations that did not pass. But what I heard from Patty is that there was some clarification, and with that clarification, I think maybe Patty's vote may change. So I'm not sure if we want to do a revote on that recommendation.
We certainly can. I believe Patty's change would be that we would change it from anonymized, or we would change it from quarterly data to an annual presentation updated quarterly. Is that correct, Patty? Is there, wait, Sean, see if there is a motion, call a motion to rebring the vote with the amendment. Or Liz?
Kim, I have a quick question. The way I understood what Patty was saying was annual statistics released quarterly. So they might roll, they'd be annual, but they'd be released quarterly. That sounds different from what you said to me.
Is there, what is the process to amend the recommendation? Because if we clarified the.
This is a co-created process. We're doing this together. So if we amended this recommendation, it would be something along the lines of we recommend updated use of force data, including instead of the current annual analysis, and then the data would be someone who writes better on their feet. Feel free to jump in.
I think after anonymized, you could just say annual use of force data updated quarterly.
Yeah. You have a date, Kim?
Annual use of force data updated quarterly instead of the current annual analysis.
What
Can
about?
you just end it at quarterly, have a period at quarterly?
Yes, we can.
What about saying we recommend the Tigard Police Department release and anonymized use of force data updated on an annual basis, however, updated quarterly. It's confusing to me if
It is, yeah.
If it's still confusing me if we're saying publicly releasing annually or quarterly.
Okay. All right, the recommendation is to release 1 year's worth of data, the previous year's worth of data each quarter. Is that correct? Yep. And Chief, please.
Yeah, I'm following along. I'm just having a little bit of problem envisioning the sliding scale, so that we're kind of commingling 12 months, running data where we do a very in-depth analysis for the year, and how that might look like. I understand what you're recommending, and so I just have to give it some thought as to the rolling numbers, no problem, but when you then analyze a rolling 12, that becomes one, staff intensive, and two, what does that look like? So just I'm going to put some thought to that to see if I can reasonably meet that expectation.
Chief, I think that's also what I'm anticipating my colleagues in the council might ask. I think they're going to be supportive of the intent of the Public Safety Advisory Board, but I think they will be asking the chief and the commander about what that looks like and what that means in terms of their ability to get that done. But I'm sure they'll be supportive of the intent of the board, but I do think they'll have some questions about how that's actually going to work.
Sean, is your hand, do you have a comment or is your hand still up from before?
Yeah, I was just concerned about this one, just the resources to do this. Information could be taken out of context, and it doesn't address the root cause issues. This is just taking a current state of Oregon requirement and increasing the requirements. That's going to take some city employees some extra time to put in their calendar and manage. That's all.
Is there a desire to re-vote on the amended? And I think the way we should do that is, Sean, you can call for a motion.
Okay.
Oh, John, I see your hand, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say the same thing, Kim. I think maybe right now is that we keep the motion, not pass, and then if someone having the recommendation later on, they could revise and make a motion late on the later date.
Jimmy.
So if the recommendation didn't pass at this time, and the recommendation goes back out for further clarification or work, can that recommendation then be brought back to the group for action?
I don't see why not, but I'm going to defer to Shelby, which I probably should have done a while ago.
Yeah, so the board can come back with a motion at any time if the desire of the board is to change its position. Although usually if something has failed, it does have to change before it comes back for a vote. So it wouldn't be the exact same thing coming back.
So we have is there a motion on the floor, or we were thinking about putting a motion on the floor?
There are no motions on the floor.
Okay. I would like to put out a motion that recommendation 2 be reviewed and rewritten to be brought back to PSAB for further action.
John.
I second that.
Okay, so moved.
Is there anyone opposed?
So to clarify, by who?
That was going to be the next thing, was that because this is coming back with a position, this will need to be taken on by an individual to rewrite and bring it back and then present it as themselves in order to be in compliance with Oregon public meeting law. So is there an individual who would like to take this recommendation and revise based on the conversation this evening? Jimmy, you're going to take it?
I'd be happy to take a crack at it and bring it back to the group.
Wonderful. Thank you. And that, I think, wraps up that piece of our agenda. Sean?
Okay. Next thing on our agenda tonight, prioritizing topics for the new year. So Kim, I'm going to turn it back over to you to facilitate that discussion.
Thanks, Sean. So something that we have been, oh, Liz, please.
Yeah, before we get started in that, and I'm going to be relying on Shelby and Officer Nunn and the chief and Commander McDonald when he's here to tell me. I haven't been there for budget for about 4 years, but as we're entering the process for our budget consideration, I want to make sure that the recommendations that the Public Safety Advisory Board have that are going to have some budget implications get considered so that we don't miss that boat, so to speak. And we're also going to have to consider, I guess I'll use the word process for how those go forward to the budget process. And is there going to be a need for the Public Safety Advisory Board to prioritize or group, or, I know the council's going to be very interested in hearing those recommendations. And I just want to make sure that that they're integrated appropriately into the budget process. So if that's something that we need to be thinking about, I'm looking to the team that's deep in the budget right now. It might be important for them to weigh in at the right time to make sure that we don't miss anything. And I know the budget committee is also going to be looking to the department, the chief in particular, in terms of how some of these recommendations integrate into, in terms of which ones can fit into things we're already doing. So anyway, that's what I'm going to say about the budget.
Chief.
So Liz, you are spot on, and we are prepping for the budget as we speak. And so it'll be, I will take all of these recommendations that passed and thoughtfully consider them. And then should I accept them as written, then I'll look for budget impacts and then incorporate them into my budget ask with leading with this is a recommendation of the Public Safety Advisory Board. And because the other step that would be longer is if for any of those, if I elected not to take them for whatever reason, and as I understand it, Shelby, and the group doesn't like my answer or believe you want to make that recommendation then to the council, that would again prolong it a little bit further. Is that right, Shelby? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yes, I will, there's really looks like just the training aspect may have the biggest impact. There is a FTE that'll be coming to the board to talk about that I think will be in a line for some of these other use of force evaluations. And so that might be right in alignment and add to that job description. So yes, we'll be mindful and we'll be timely on that.
And I think the process is that the Public Safety Advisory Board, if they know which ones the chief isn't including, for probably a lot of it was going to be not enough money, then the Public Safety Advisory Board can, I believe, go before the budget committee and maybe advocate, separately for something. Hoping we're sort of all on the same page and recognize we can't fund everything this year. But I do think it's important that the Public Safety Advisory Board understand the chief's role, and the chief needs to put together a budget and she's got to be mindful of the resources it takes. And so I just want to make sure everybody's clear on how that's going to work.
Thank you, Liz. And moving on to a similar conversation around limited resources. In this case, it is time. So something that we have been talking about in our prep meetings is that the board is scheduled and will conclude the PSAP as we know it at the end of June 2022. That leaves us with 14 meetings between now and then. And if you are keeping count, we have spent the last 9 meetings working through training and use of force. So while it seems like we are only halfway through, we are actually moving at a pretty good pace towards the finish line. And if you look at the work plan that we had sent out earlier this week and that we worked through together, there are a lot of topics that are still in there. So one of the things that we wanted to bring back to this group is to think about prioritization. I'm going to pull up a mock schedule of what we're looking at between now and the end of the Public Safety Advisory Board in June. And you'll see we have about time for maybe 2 more topics, depending on timing. Let's share this. I just set up a grid. You can see first meeting of November, that is tonight's meeting. We're concluding the use of force recommendations was the main effort. Our next meeting will be talking about the community-led officer onboarding, the request from the chief. And then our first meeting in December is when we'll do that laser shot training debrief, which I think has a lot of merit for the community, as well as for us as a group to discuss that experience. We'll be following that into performance review and discipline, which closes that loop of what we call the Tigard officer's journey. So we started with the hiring process, moved into training, and then performance review and discipline kind of closes that circle. Moving on from there, we don't have topics. That's where I would like to ask for your input on one or two just top priority topics that you think it's really important that we discuss as this group currently exists. And then I'd like to reserve the last two meetings in June because I think it's very important that as a group who's been together at that point for about 1.5 years, we talk about what's next for the community engagement with policing in Tigard, as well as a reflection on this process and a fitting conclusion to our work together. I think Jimmy brought up last meeting, maybe a couple meetings ago, the journey of group development, group dynamics. You start with the forming and the storming and the performing, but a very important last step to that is the formal adjourning of our time together. Any questions kind of about the schedule or what the ask is of you? Liz, please.
Sorry, I have a question. I'm just one board member, but I also happen to be on the city council. Do we actually have a hard stop at the end of June if we had to go into another couple of months to finish something that was critical to the board? I'm a little bit concerned about the board feeling like, we didn't get traffic stops or I'm looking at the list, some of the things that are on this list, if we didn't get those finished. I'm also mindful of when people are appointed to a board, they make a commitment to a time frame. But I don't know, I think if the board was interested in going a little longer to cover some things that they thought were really important, I'm pretty sure my colleagues on the council would be open to that. So again, I know I'm just speaking for myself. I know you all made a commitment for a certain time period, and I don't want to say this is going to go on forever, but I'm also very concerned about not covering something that's really important to the board if it's going to take 3 more meetings or something. So that's my thought on that. And maybe people disagree, but I just want to make sure that people knew that I think that's possible if it's important to the board.
Thank you, Liz. I see a thumbs up from Jeff. I still think it may warrant conversation that even though this board can maybe play with our timeline a little bit, and I will completely defer to the city on making any decisions there, to prioritize what are those top couple topics, because I think looking at the schedule, we could probably keep meeting for 3 more years and still have plenty to discuss when it comes to policing and have the effects in the community and more topics that come up over time. So if that is still acceptable, I would still like to talk about some of the top topics for the group. And Patty, please.
So as we embark on this conversation, I'm just wondering if Chief McAlpine has some things that she feels are important for us to make sure we get to. Oh, there she is.
The next hand.
You read my mind, Patty. I like that. The only thing I was going to definitely make sure that I think is important, not only locally, but on a national level, is having the Washington County Mental Health Response Team come to this board and talk about that program and the fact that we are now members of it and that we have a South City contingency, because that may be there's funding to keep it going down the road. So I think it's extremely important, and perhaps have them even talk about the difference between MHRT and cahoots, They're two different programs. And so just maybe, I think that fits right in line with the national narrative and also just how we handle some of our crisis in mental health.
Thank you, Chief. And Michael, Brian, please.
I just want to echo something that Liz mentioned, which is traffic stops. And I think we have to devote some time to that and even give it some priority. It's the most common reason that citizens and community members interact with the police all across the country. And the time I've been on the court and we are mainly a traffic court, we've had 6,000 citations per year. About a third of those have been given typically to Tigard residents. And last year it was 26,000 citations, but a lot of those were due to photo enforcement. So there was no direct contact between officers and people who received citations. But I think that's a pretty essential topic to address, not to suggest that there's a problem, but I think a review by the committee would be extremely helpful.
Thank you. What I'd like to propose is that we go back into breakout rooms for a little bit and come up with what your group thinks are the top 3 priorities, and then we'll come back together. And this will not be the end of this discussion. This is an important prioritization of the next 6 months of meetings. So we will have that discussion tonight to come up with some priorities. And then in 2 weeks, when we come back together, the second half of our conversation will be about finalizing what those key topics that we'll be focusing on for the rest of our time together. Does that sound good? Okay. You are going into different breakout rooms. I did manage to find the time to rearrange them. So enjoy your new friends. See you guys soon. And you'll have 10 minutes. Well, welcome back, everybody. I know we had a interesting conversation around priorities. I'm interested to see how much we're in alignment and then continue the discussion next week or 2 weeks. So which group would like to go first? Patty, please.
Okay, we prioritize the social justice as our first priority. And with the potential of possibly adding something in terms of the increase in crime with the decriminalization of drugs, just as a possibility. And then traffic stops was our second priority. And then we did decide it would be nice to just have a brief report out from in terms of the youth of Tigard, in terms of after February, when they've had their next meeting, the school resource officer group, just to get maybe half a meeting devoted to hearing what has gone on with that group, since they've been meeting quite a bit and have and done quite a lot of work on that front.
So one thing that came up, I think, similarly in our conversation, I'd be remiss if I didn't also push back a little bit on you, because I pushed back on Jimmy, was the social justice was a very large topic. So if you had to select one kind of theme from within there, did you have a priority?
Probably the mental health, homeless first section.
Thank you. And who would like to report out next? Amelia, please.
Yeah, so our group had pretty similar priorities. We also talked about social justice, especially with the mental health and homelessness. Then next, it was sort of a mix of the youth in Tigard, traffic stops, and officers' appearance.
And who is our last reporter?
I could go. Yeah, so we also believe in terms of social justice, prioritizing it within social justice in terms of behavioral health, houseless individuals. We also touch base on the youth in Tigard, looking at in terms of resources, school resource officers, to make sure that some of the outbursts within their student population are not normalized, and there's some kind of to put some kind of structure to that kind of stuff. We also touch base regarding in terms of performance and review discipline too. I know that might be on our discussion, or did we skip that section?
That is our next discussion, and we were going to do that one no matter what, and then we were going to prioritize what comes after that, if that's
perfect. And the last comment would be in terms of we feel strongly that all the bullet points are important, and within our groups, I think a few of us, or maybe all of us, have felt that we want to be able to touch base and be open to extending the timeline if needed.
Thank you, John. Well, it sounds like overwhelmingly, along with the chief, we will be discussing mental health response in social justice, and then we'll move on from there. But I do want you all to think about this for the next couple of weeks, so we can revisit the discussion, talk to communities about what the communities that you're a part of, about what they feel are the most pressing needs, and then we'll come back together in 2 weeks and talk more about what our priority actions are. And that concludes that part of our discussion. Sean, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Kim. So now I'd like to give all of our board members an opportunity to bring forward or talk about any current events or things that you'd like to share with the group.
Jeff.
Thank you. I know we're going to have like a debrief on the laser shot training at some point, but I was able to go through that experience. I don't want to say like the pleasure of going through that experience, because I actually shut down in the third example. I just didn't want to do it anymore. So it was a great training and very different from what I am used to in terms of having to speak immediately and clearly and get communication going. and also just hearing how Sergeant Prater talked me through training and how they're trained to communicate with people in like crisis interactions. So if you haven't done it, I know a lot of people have already, but would definitely recommend it.
Thanks, Jeff. I can't wait till we have that conversation. And Sean, please.
Today on my lunch, I was in a neighboring community and I witnessed an individual having a complete breakdown and yelling and screaming at thin air and walking in the public right of way and toward a Starbucks and shops. And he was screaming slurs against LGBTQ. I'm not going to repeat the words, but it was really sad to watch that. Somebody else shared that they witnessed something similar this week or today too in our community. And so anyways, I just wanted to share that there seems to be a wave of mental health crisis that we're in the midst of. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And John, please.
Yeah, just as we hit towards the winter season, we just got to the fall. Just want to remind folks that you see folks who are houseless. Just Compassion in our area offers showers and laundry for the first Sunday of every month from 1 to 3 o'clock. There's also winter shelter that are setting up and it's going to open up probably the 15th of November. And folks who are houseless would need to be registered. So you can find more information on the Washington County website regarding winter shelter. So if you have folks you know of or who needs winter shelter, that kind of stuff, or laundry, who are houseless, Just Compassion and Washington County will be your resources.
Thank you, John, for sharing those. And Jimmy.
Yes, John took the words right out of my mouth. I participated in a fundraising event for Just Compassion over the last several weeks, doing some fundraising for them. And I had kind of heard of the organization beforehand, but Margaret Doherty approached me and asked if I would be interested in assisting in the fundraising. I've done some research on my own, and I found them to be an excellent group of individuals and a coalition of faith communities to assist in the whole houseless and homeless situation. And what excited me about this is that they are locally oriented. They are working inside the Tigard community and the Beaverton community, East Washington County community, and it's just a wonderful group of individuals that are committed. It's a fairly broad-based group of folks. They have officers from Portland's behavioral unit, which deals with addiction services and addiction issues of the houseless and homeless community in Portland. We have some of our own local officers or staff who are involved with the organization. So it's just to, again, put some information out there. As John was saying, if you know people that may be in a houseless situation or homeless and are in need of services, they are definitely a good resource to look at.
Thank you, Jimmy. And Liz, please.
Yeah, I was going to echo what's been said about Just Compassion. I had the honor of going to their meetings when I was on the Tigard staff when they were just forming, and it's an amazing organization. So kudos to you, Jimmy, for assisting with their fundraising, because they're just amazing and they continue to grow and do amazing things. I did want to ask Eduardo, without putting him on the spot, he could just email us. We used to have cards that were laminated that we could give out to folks. homeless folks that might need information about resources. So that might be something that if Eduardo could just email us and let us know where they might be available. The city laminates them. They talk about where showers and laundry and what the process is for getting a shelter. So if we still have access to those cards, Eduardo, not to put you on the spot right now, but if you could send out an email so folks could get those if they would find them helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Follow up with that information, and I'll add that the conversations to update those cards have happened and are wrapping up. We'll have a community roundtable tomorrow to get any final details that aren't on the cards yet. But yeah, thank you for bringing those up.
I also want to know, I put the link to Just Compassion's website in our chat if anyone would like to learn more. And Chief, please.
Yeah, two things. First, if you were not aware, council goal number 1 is to develop a centric person regional response to homelessness. And so myself and Library Director Bernard are the leads of that effort. So even though I'm kind of removing my hat as a chief, and we're just working on that project, which is also a MOU with Washington County on addressing encampments, evaluating them, sheltering them in place until they can get services. Washington County has vested a lot of ARPA dollars into this effort. And so this is a huge focus by the council and by the city. So I'm happy to give updates down the road as well regarding those efforts. And then the other part is just kind of closing the loop on the communication. Our PIO, Kelsey Anderson, just did a week-long training in Albany, and she learned a lot. And part of it was, that critical communication. So she is already, her head is spinning. She's heard tonight's comments as well. And so she'll be leading that effort to develop that communication strategy based on what she heard tonight and based on all of her training last week.
Thank you, Chief. Always amazed at how quickly you get your staff going on something from PSUB. And Sean, I don't see any other hands.
Okay. Well, we're at the end of this. We have 5 minutes left. We're just going to do a quick wrap up of outstanding items, and then Kim can walk us through the next steps for the next unit we're undertaking, and what we're doing to wrap up the current unit that we're working on.
Yeah, so tonight wrapped up our use of force with our vote on the 4 recommendations. Looking forward through the end of this year, we'll be doing the community-led officer onboarding discussion at our next meeting, as well as continuing our conversation about priorities for next year. And then for our first and only meeting in December, so we canceled our second one, we will do the laser shot training debrief. And then looking into January through next June, we'll continue to have that conversation, but get used to this grid. We'll be seeing a lot in the next couple months.
Okay, great meeting, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me as I did this for the first time. So with that, I would like to call a motion to adjourn. Call for a motion to adjourn.
I moved.
Okay. Any second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Hey, everyone.